This week on Africa Weekly, we go to the Gambia, where hopes of a brighter future with a new government could mean a sea change in the migrant exodus. We speak to a former child soldier in Uganda who's had to rebuild his life after 3 years of fighting with the Lord's Resistance Army. And we take a trip to the Ivory Coast, where the pressure is growing between protecting the forest and the farmers who live there. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week.
I hereby reject the results in totality.
A stunning U-turn for Gambian President Yahya Jammeh, insisting he will not accept opponent Adama Barrow's victory in the presidential elections. Jammeh had conceded defeat, but then challenged the result, triggering an avalanche of international condemnation. 4 West African leaders landed in the Gambia with a mission to persuade Jammeh to leave office, but left without a deal in the standoff. Carnage after a bomb blast tore through a church in Cairo, killing dozens and striking at the heart of Egypt's Christian minority. The explosion happened during Sunday Mass in a church adjacent to St. Mark's Cathedral. Islamic State later claimed responsibility. It's one of the deadliest attacks to target the country's Coptic community in living memory. A caved-in corrugated iron roof. That's all that's left of a church in southeastern Nigeria when it collapsed onto a crowd of worshippers, killing at least 60. Some reports put the figure at over 100. The roof of the Rainers Bible Ministry was still under construction when it came crashing down. Authorities are trying to determine the cause of the incident. In the northeast of the country, a message of hope.
But now Boko Haram have been defeated.
The war with Boko Haram has been won, so says the governor of Borno State. He predicted that tens of thousands of people displaced by fighting will return home by May. But just this week, 2 young girls blew themselves up in a suicide attack at a market in Borno's capital, killing at least 45. The attack bearing all the hallmarks of the Islamist militant group. Somalia shaken by attacks in Mogadishu. At least 16 killed in a suicide truck bombing claimed by Al-Shabaab outside the busy seaport. Residents describing a huge blast that could be heard across the capital. This attack follows just a few days later by explosions at a restaurant and an army checkpoint in the city. There's been an increase in attacks in the capital as the country elects a new government. Thousands of desperate young Gambians have taken the perilous journey across the Mediterranean Sea to Italy. But a shock opposition victory in the presidential elections has sparked a new hope for a brighter future and a halt to the exodus, though Jammeh is now contesting his defeat.
About to leave home, maybe forever. This was Ansu the day before the Gambian presidential election. To help his family, he was willing to risk the so-called back way, the perilous route overland to Libya and across the Med to Italy. Although he shared this bed with his 2 younger brothers, he hadn't told anybody from his family about his plan.
It's only that, but I don't have anything to go with it. I just feel the situation, how my family is, and I'm not working here, so I have to go and die for them,
In the lead up to the election, President Yahya Jammeh claimed migration was a matter of choice.
Migration is a choice. In this country, it's not because of poverty.
But according to the opposition coalition, thousands of young Gambians have fled because of the desperate lack of jobs and opportunities. After 22 years of Jammeh's iron-fisted rule, Gambia's opposition rode an unprecedented wave of support to a remarkable victory. Amid the celebrations, new hope for Gambia's youth.
President Barrow, for the Gambia, our homeland, we need our love and unity. 2016, new year, new style, new president, new life. This is the Gambia having their freedom. This is the freedom for our youth.
Ansu was supposed to leave on the back way a day ago, but he's now found temporary work on a fishing boat and is hoping the new government will herald a change in fortune for the country and for himself.
I would like to stay and hustle and make business here, Yeah, I would really like to live in my country and make it here, inshallah, by God's power.
His family broke down in tears when he finally told them what he'd been about to do. If the situation doesn't improve in the next few years, he says he'll still leave. And with Jammeh now contesting his defeat, the hope on the horizon has already lost some of its shine.
Kenneth Kaunda has rebuilt his life from scratch after 3 years in the bush fighting with the Lord's Resistance Army. He was abducted at the age of 13, but like other LRA fighters, was granted an amnesty after he escaped. He's pleased to see Dominic Ongwen on trial, remembering how commanders like Ongwen forced him and others to commit terrible crimes.
You do things to protect your life. Because when you're like this and you begin to run, even your friend will just shoot you. You see somebody being beaten like a pig. Everybody, all those ones, their hearts were broken. And then you say, am I going to survive?
Across northern Uganda, the LRA committed terrible atrocities for 20 years. Ongwen is charged with crimes including enslavement, rape, torture and conscripting child soldiers. But some still feel he shouldn't be on trial when other commanders were pardoned. Lily is Dominic Ongwen's sister. She recalls the song he sang to her as a child before they were both abducted by the LRA. She says her brother was following orders and his superiors should be in the dock.
It's not actually fair to see few of the LRA commanders behind bars, and senior commanders are walking as free men on the street. While in the bush, it was these senior commanders that were training the juniors like Dominic Ongwen, and today they're well off. I don't see it as something good.
Here in Gulu town, victims and perpetrators live side by side. Returning to normal life after years in the bush is a struggle for the soldiers of the LRA, who must come to terms with the crimes they committed as children. Those working to rehabilitate LRA victims here say that while in the bush, their way of coping was to do as they were told.
It's just like teaching a child. If you introduce something for a child as a child, it becomes part of them, and it's like from the unknown to the known.
Far from Gulu, an international court will now have to decide whether a childhood lost to violence can justify the crimes of an adult.
These cocoa farmers have lost everything. They used to farm the fertile slopes of Mount Pico, a national park in the west of Ivory Coast. But in July, authorities forced them to leave.
When we left, we were in the village here. We didn't eat. We were hungry. We didn't understand anything.
The purpose of the evictions was to protect the forest. But little was done to explain that to farmers, and now some are returning illegally.
We must educate them, make them understand that forest conservation is in their interest, and that without the forest, we can't have sustainable cocoa farming. That without the forest, we won't have rain, and that climate change will destroy the forest. That's what we have to explain to the farmers.
An estimated 50,000 people have been evicted. Many are migrants from Burkina Faso. They've poured out of the forest into villages surrounding the park. As the Paris Agreement on Climate Change comes into force, all countries need to take action to stop deforestation and reduce emissions. But right groups say that protecting the environment doesn't justify these forced and often violent evictions. The Nigerian women's football team continue their protest, with players vowing to keep going until bonuses and other allowances are paid. After winning the African Championship, they appear determined to win this fight too. Next week, we take a look at poaching across the continent that has killed tens of thousands of animals. As 2016 draws to a close, Africa's elephants and rhinos are counting the cost of the crisis. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.